Wholesome Appalachia Episode 3, Chuck Yeager. Hey y'all, I'm Heather, and this is not Poison Appalachia, it's Wholesome Appalachia. Once a month we'll take a walk on the brighter side of Appalachia, because there are a lot of good things in Appalachia. I'm just drawn to the darker side of things. So the third Friday of every month we'll have a bonus Wholesome Appalachia episode. So I said on the last Wholesome Appalachia episode that I should maybe do one on a man. I mean, it's only right, I guess. Today I'm going to do one on Chuck Yeager, West Virginia's Golden Son. Brief disclaimer here, and I'll go into a little bit more detail later, but there is some controversy here with Chuck Yeager. I couldn't find a whole lot, but there's a story that he derailed the career of the first African-American astronaut for the fact that he was black. There's a ton of conflicting information, so keep that in mind, but I will go on and tell his story because I think he deserves it. I don't know. It's hard when people are kind of morally ambiguous, but I mean, overall, I think his story is a story to tell, so that's why I'm going to do it. Chuck Yeager was born February 3rd, 1923 in Myra, West Virginia, to farming parents Albert Howe Yeager and Susie May Yeager. His father, a natural gas driller in the local coal fields, moved the family to nearby Hamlin, West Virginia by 1928. Yeager had two brothers, Roy and Hal Jr., and two sisters, Doris Ann, who was accidentally killed at the age of 2 by 4-year-old Roy playing with a firearm, and Pansy Lee. Chuck grew up working with a wide variety of mechanical devices. He could take apart an engine and put it back together easily. He was an average student more interested in hunting and fishing than school, but he did excel at anything mathematical or anything with manual dexterity. By the time he was a teenager, Chuck could disassemble truck engines, overhaul them, and reassemble them with ease. Yeager had an unusually sharp vision, a vision acuity rated of 2010, which once enabled him to shoot a deer at 600 yards. In high school, Chuck played basketball and football for the Hamlin High School team. His best subjects were typing, where he could type 60 words per minute, and geometry. His first experience with the military was a teen at the Citizens Military Training Camp at Fort Benjamin Harrison, Indianapolis, Indiana, during the summers of 1939 and 1940. Chuck Yeager graduated from high school in June of 1941, just 6 months before the U.S. entered World War II. Now comes a lot of Air Force and military words I know I'm not very familiar with, so please forgive me if I mispronounce them or misspeak on what I know. Yeager enlisted as a private in the U.S. Army Air Forces on September 12, 1941, and became an aircraft mechanic at George Air Force Base, Victorville, California. At enlistment, Yeager was not eligible for flight training because of his age and educational background, but the entry of the U.S. into the World War II was less than 3 months later, prompted the USAAF to alter its recruiting standards. Initially, Yeager trained as a mechanic, but in 1942, he learned about an Army Air Force's initiative to increase the number of American combat pilots by accepting applications from enlisted men with no college education. Yeager applied in December 1942 and was accepted for flight training. He earned his wings the following March and joined the 363rd Fighter Squadron, which was equipped with Bell P-39 Era Cobras. Yeager and the rest of the 363rd Fighter Squadron, part of the 357th Fighter Group, sailed for England in November 1943 to join the war against Germany. He was commissioned to reserve flight officer in 1943 and became a pilot in the fighter command of the 8th Air Force stationed in England. In England, the 357th Fighter Group joined the 8th Air Force and refitted with P-51 Mustang fighters. Yeager took possession of a P-51B Mustang that he named Glamorous Glen, after his fiancée Glenna Stickhouse. Yeager soon upgraded to a P-51D Mustang, which he christened Glamorous Glen 2. That's hard to say. Later to be followed by a P-51C Mustang named, guess what, Glamorous Glen 3. Yeager flew his first combat mission in February of 1944. He quickly discovered that he had a natural aptitude for dogfighting because of his superb eyesight and his ability to rapidly react while remaining calm. On March 4th, he scored his first aerial victory against a German Messerschmitt Bf 109 fighter while escorting bombers in a daylight raid over Germany. The very next day, Yeager's luck turned when he was shot down near Bordeaux, France. After successfully parachuting into occupied territory, Yeager managed to evade capture with the help of the French resistance. During the next 2 months, Yeager made his way to Spain and then back to England. Although American pilots who escaped occupied territory were normally forbidden from returning to combat so they would not betray members of the French resistance if they were shot down and captured, Yeager obtained permission from General Dwight Eisenhower himself to resume flying combat missions. Eisenhower's gamble paid off on October 12, 1944, when Yeager destroyed 5 Bf-109 fighters in a single engagement. First Lieutenant Yeager later reported how he spotted the German fighters 1.5 miles away and attacked them with the sun at his back. 2 of the German pilots bailed out immediately when they realized Yeager was in a perfect position to take their aircraft from machine gun fire. In Yeager's after-action report, he explained how he used the next German fighter and opened fire from about 600 yards away. Yeager observed strikes all over the ship, particularly heavy in the cockpit. Yeager did not bother to pursue the stricken plane because he spotted yet another German fighter. This time, Yeager closed to just 100 yards and took a deflect on shot of about 10 degrees, whatever that means. He said, "I gave about a 3-second burst and the whole fuselage split open and blew up after we passed." Finally, Yeager forced a 5th German pilot to bail out after scoring hits on its plane's wings and tail section. Yeager was subsequently promoted to captain in recognition of his skills and leadership. Then, on November 6, 1944, Yeager was leading a flight that encountered several brand new German Me-262 jet fighters near Assen, Germany. Although the German fighters promptly used their superior speed to escape in the clouds, Yeager dropped below the cloud cover and spotted a lone Me-262 preparing to land. Yeager dove upon the jet and scored several hits on his wings, causing the German pilot to crash several hundred feet short of the runway in a wooded area. Later that month, Yeager scored 4 additional victories against German FW-190 aircraft on November 27th. By the time World War II ended in Europe, Yeager had flown 64 combat missions and was credited with single-handedly destroying 12 enemy aircraft, which to me seems pretty impressive. I don't know what other people's stats were, though, but I think that's pretty darn good. On February 26, 1945, Yeager married Glynis Dickhouse, and the couple had 4 children. Glynis Yeager died in 1990, predeceasing her husband by 30 years. After World War II, Yeager was stationed at Wright Field in Ohio, where he had the opportunity to pilot the Air Force's new jet fighters. Colonel Albert Boyd took Yeager's flying ability and handpicked the young captain to become Army Air Force's test pilot in 1946. Although Yeager was one of the most junior test pilots, Boyd selected him to become the first to attempt to break the sound barrier. Boyd later stated that he was impressed by Yeager's instincts and ability to remain focused under pressure. On October 14, 1947, over California's Mojave Desert, Yeager successfully piloted the Bell X-1 to a speed of Mach 1.06, which is 700 miles per hour. Next, he became a flight instructor and then a test pilot, securing a regular commission as a captain in 1947. Yeager remained in the U.S. Army Air Forces after the war, becoming a test pilot at the Muroc Army Airfield, now Edwards Air Force Base, following graduation from the Air Materiel Command Flight Performance School. After Bell aircraft test pilot Chalmers Slick Goodlin demanded $150,000, which is equivalent to $2 million in 2023, to break the sound barrier, the U.S. Army Air Force selected the 24-year-old Yeager to fly the rocket-powered Bell XS-1 in a NACA program to reach the high-speed flight. Under the National Security Act of 1947, the USAAF became the United States Air Force on September 18th. So, 2 nights before the scheduled flight date, Yeager broke 2 ribs when he fell down from a horse. He was worried that the injury would remove him from the mission and reported that he went to a civilian doctor in Rosamond who taped his ribs. Besides his wife, who was riding with him, Yeager told only his friend and fellow project pilot Jack Ridley about the accident. On the day of the flight, Yeager was in such pain that he could not seal the X-1's hatch by himself. Ridley rigged up a device using the end of a broom handle as an extra lever to allow Yeager to seal the hatch. Yeager was chosen from several volunteers to test fly the secret X-1 aircraft. built by the Bell Aircraft Company to test the capabilities of human pilot and fixed-wing aircraft against the severe aerodynamic stresses of sonic flight. So on October 4th, 1947, over Rogers Dry Lake in Southern California, he rode the X-1 attached to a B-29 mothership at an altitude of 25,000 feet. The X-1 then rocketed separately to 40,000 feet, and Yeager became the first man to break the sound barrier, which is approximately 662 miles per hour at that altitude. The success of the mission was not announced to the public for nearly 8 months until June 10, 1948. Yeager continued to make test flights, and on December 12, 1953, he established a world speed record of 1,650 miles per hour in an X-1A rocket plane. Yeager broke the sound barrier on October 14, 1947, in level flight while piloting X-1's Glamorous Glennis at Mach 105, an altitude of 40,000 feet, over the Rogers Dry Lake, which I just kind of told about that. Sorry about that. Yeager was awarded the Mackay Trophy and the Collier Trophy for this in 1948 for his Mach transcending flight, and the Harmon International Trophy in 1954. The X-1 he flew that day was later put on permanent display at the Smithsonian Institute's National Air and Space Museum. During 1952, he attended the Air Command and Staff College. He returned to Europe in October 1954 and became a commander for the 417th Fighter Squadron at Hahn Air Force Base in Germany. In May 1955, he remained in that position, or that was in May 1955, sorry. He remained in that position when his squadron was reassigned to Toul-Rosières Air Force Base in France in 1956, in April. Upon his return to the United States in September 1957, he was assigned the 413th Fighter Wing at George Air Force Base, California, and in April 1958 became commander of the 1st Fighter Squadron. In April 1958, he went with the 1st Tactical Fighter Squadron to Moron Air Base in Spain. Moron? I don't know. Where he remained until November 1958. He returned to George Air Force Base with the same unit, which was later redesignated the 306th Tactical Fighter Squadron. General Yeager graduated from the Air War College, Maxwell Air Force Base, Alabama, in June 1961 and became commandant, I guess commandant's probably German, but commandant of the Aerospace Research Pilot School, where all military astronauts are trained in 1962. He was a full colonel in 1962 after completion of the year's studies and final thesis on STOL aircraft at the Air War College. He became first commandant of the USAF Aerospace Research Pilot School, which produced astronauts for NASA and then the United States Air Force. After his redesignation from the United States Air Force Flight Test Pilot School, he only had a high school education, so he was not eligible to become an astronaut like those he trained. In April 1962, Yeager made his only flight with Neil Armstrong. Their job, flying a T-33, was to evaluate Smith Ranch Dry Lake in Nevada for use as an emergency landing site for the North American X-15. In his autobiography, he wrote that he knew the lake bed was unsuitable for landings after recent rains, but Armstrong insisted on flying out anyways. As Armstrong suggested that they do a touch and go, Yeager advised against it, telling him, "You may touch, but you ain't gonna go." When Armstrong did touch down, the wheels became stuck in the mud, bringing the plane to a sudden stop and provoking Yeager to fits of laughter. They had to wait for a rescue. In 1963, Yeager was flying the experimental Lockheed Starfighter at over twice the speed of sound when the engine shut off and he was forced to abandon the spinning aircraft. Yeager's compression suit was set on fire with burning debris from the ejector seat, which became entangled in his parachute. He'd survived the fall but required extensive skin grafts for his burns. I looked a little further into this, and this is what it said about the accident. Between December 1963 and January 1964, Yeager completed 5 flights on the NASA M2 F1 lifting body. An accident during the 1963 December test flight is one of the school's NF-104s resulted in serious injuries. After climbing to a near altitude record, the plane's controls became ineffective and it entered a flat spin. After several turns and an altitude loss of approximately 95,000 feet, Yeager ejected from the plane, and during the ejection, the seat straps released normally, but the seat base slammed into Yeager, with the still hot rocket motor breaking his helmet's plastic faceplate and causing his emergency oxygen supply to catch fire. The resulting burns to his face required extensive and agonizing medical care. This was Yeager's last attempt at setting test flying records. So, that's a pretty tough guy there, I think. Now let's cover the controversy, because it needs to be talked about. It's the elephant in the room. Yeager's participation in the test pilot training program from NASA included controversial behavior. Yeager reportedly did not believe that Ed Dwight, the first African-American pilot admitted to the program, should be a part of it. In the 2019 documentary series Chasing the Moon, the filmmakers made the claim that Yeager instructed staff and participants at the school that Washington is trying to cram them down our throats. President Kennedy is using this to make racial equality, so do not speak to him, do not socialize with him, do not drink with him, do not invite him over to your house. In 6 months he'll be gone. In his autobiography, Dwight tells how Yeager's leadership led to discriminatory treatment throughout his training at the Edwards Air Force Base. Obviously, this is not right, and I don't want to make excuses, but it was a different time back then. Unfortunately, people had different beliefs, and growing up in West Virginia definitely probably had a lot to do with that. Still, I would have hoped that he'd had a different attitude for African Americans, and it is disappointing. But does it tarnish his other achievements? I don't know. I guess that's up for each of us to decide. But let's continue with his story. The Air Force Space School was closed in 1966 as NASA took over the training of astronauts. During the Vietnam War, Yeager, now a full colonel, commanded the 405th Fighter Wing out of the Philippines, flying 127 air support missions and training bomber pilots. In 1968, Yeager was promoted to brigadier general. He is one of the very few who have risen from enlisted man to general in the Air Force. In 1970, General Yeager served the U.S. Defense Representative to Pakistan and supervised Pakistan's air defense in its war with India. From 1971 to 1973, at the behest of Ambassador Joseph Farland, Yeager was assigned as the air attaché in Pakistan to advise the Pakistan Air Force, which was led by Abdur Rahim Khan, the first Pakistani to break the sound barrier. He arrived in Pakistan at a time when tensions with India were at a high level. One of Yeager's jobs during this time was to assist Pakistani technicians in installing AIM-9 sidewinders on PAF's Shenyang F-6 fighters. He also had a keen interest in interacting with the PAF personnel from various Pakistani squadrons and helping them develop combat tactics. In one instance, in 1972, while visiting the No. 15 Squadron at Peshawar Air Base, the squadron's OC commander, Najib Khan, escorted him to K2 in a pair of F-86Fs after Yeager requested a visit to the second highest mountain on Earth. After hostilities broke out in 1971, he decided to stay in West Pakistan and continued overseeing the PAF's operations. Yeager recalled the Pakistanis whipped the Indians' asses in the sky. The Pakistanis scored a 3-to-1 kill ratio, knocking out 102 Russian-made Indian jets and losing 34 airplanes of their own. During the war, he flew around the Western Front in a helicopter, documenting wreckages of Indian aircraft of Soviet origin, which included Sukhoi Su-7s and MiG-21s. These aircraft were transported to the United States after the war for analysis. Yeager also flew around in his Beechcraft Queen Air, a small passenger aircraft that was assigned to him by the Pentagon, picking up shot-down Indian fighter pilots. The Beechcraft was later destroyed during an air raid by the IAF at a Pakistani Air Force base when Yeager was not present. Edward C. Ingram, U.S. diplomat who had served as political advisor to the Ambassador Farland in Islamabad, recalled the incident in the Washington Monthly in October 1985. After Yeager's Beechcraft was destroyed during an Indian air raid, he raged to his cowering colleagues that the Indian pilot had been specifically instructed by Indira Gandhi to blast his plane. It was, he later wrote, the Indian way of giving Uncle Sam the finger. Yeager was incensed over the incident and demanded U.S. retaliation. General Yeager assumed command over He reported to the Air Force Space Inspection and Safety Center at Norton Air Force Base, California, in March 1973, and became the director of the center in June of 1973. On March 1st, 1975, Yeager retired from the Air Force at Norton Air Force Base, California, but continued to serve as a consulting test pilot for many years. In 1976, Chuck Yeager was awarded the Congressional Silver Medal, presented to him by President Gerald Ford. President Ronald Reagan later honored him with the Presidential Medal of Freedom. These are the highest honors a nation bestows for outstanding service. In 1973, Yeager was inducted into the National Aviation Hall of Fame, arguably aviation's highest honor. In 1974, Yeager received the Golden Plate Award for the American Academy of Achievement. In December 1975, the U.S. Congress awarded Yeager a silver medal equivalent to a non-combat Medal of Honor for contributing immeasurably to aerospace science by risking his life in piloting an X-1 research airplane faster than the speed of sound in October 1947. President Gerald Ford presented the medal to Yeager in a ceremony at the White House on December 8, 1976. Yeager never attended college and was often modest about his background, but is considered by many, including Flying Magazine, and the California Hall of Fame, the State of West Virginia National Aviation Hall of Fame, and a few U.S. presidents in the United States Army Air Force, to be one of the greatest pilots of all time. Air and Space Smithsonian Magazine ranked him as the 5th greatest pilot of all time in 2003. Regardless of his lack of higher education, West Virginia's Marshall University named him the highest academic scholarship, the Society of Yeager Scholars, in his honor. He was the chairman of Experimental Aircraft Association's Young Eagle program from 1994 to 2004, and was named the program's chairman emeritus. In 1966, Yeager was inducted into the International Air and Space Hall of Fame. He was inducted into the International Space Hall of Fame in 1981. He was inducted into the Aerospace Walk of Honor in 1990s in inaugural class. Yeager Airport in Charleston, West Virginia is named in his honor. The Interstate 64, Interstate 77 bridge over the Kanawha River in Charleston is named in his honor. He also flew directly under the Kanawha Bridge, and West Virginia named it the Chuck Yeager Bridge. On October 19, 2006, the state of West Virginia also honored Yeager with a marker along Corridor G, part of U.S. Highway 119, in his home in Lincoln County, and also renamed part of it the Yeager Highway. Yeager was an honorary board member of the humanitarian organization Wings of Hope. On August 25, 2009, Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger and Maria Shriver announced that Yeager would be one of the 13 California Hall of Fame inductees in the California Museum's year-long exhibit. The induction ceremony was on December 1, 2009 in Sacramento, California. Flying Magazine ranked Yeager number 5 on its 2013 list of the 51 heroes of aviation. For many years, he was the highest-ranking living person on the list. The Civil Air Patrol, the volunteer auxiliary of the USAF, awards the Chuck Yeager Award to its senior members as part of his aerospace education program. Yeager named his planes after his wife Glennis as a good luck charm. You're my good luck charm, hun. Any plane I name after you always brings me home. Yeager and Glennis moved to Grass Valley, California after his retirement from the Air Force in 1975. The couple prospered, and as a result of Yeager's best-selling autobiography, speaking engagements, and commercial ventures, but Glennis Yeager died of ovarian cancer in 1990. They had 4 children, Susan, Dawn, Mickey, and Sharon. Yeager's son Mickey died unexpectedly in Oregon on March 26, 2011. Chuck Yeager made his last flight as a military consultant on October 14, 1997, the 50th anniversary of his history-making flight in the X-1. He observed the occasion by once again breaking the sound barrier, this time in an F-15 fighter. Yeager is referred to by many as one of the greatest pilots of all time. Throughout his life, he flew more than 360 different types of aircrafts over a 70-year period and continued to fly for 2 decades after retirement as a consultant pilot for the United States. Yeager lived in Grass Valley, Northern California, and died on the afternoon of December 7th, 2020, which is actually Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day, which is kind of an interesting fact. He died at the age of 97 in an LA hospital. Following his death, President Donald Trump issued a statement of condolences stating Yeager was one of the greatest pilots in history, a proud West Virginian, and an American original who relentlessly pushed the boundaries of human achievement. Chuck Yeager was a pretty impressive man for sure, and to come from such humble beginnings in West Virginia, I think he did a lot to make West Virginia proud of their native son. There is actually a lot of people in West Virginia connected to NASA. I'll probably cover some more of them one day. But that's it for today's Wholesome Appalachia episode. I have a couple ideas for next month's, but nothing for sure. As always, thank you for listening. Follow me on social medias under Poison Appalachia. Check my website out at poisonappalachia.com. If you are able to, could you please like, rate, and share me on your whatever podcast platform you listen to. Thanks. Talk to y'all next week.